just a wish. No more war, no final fist. Wisdom whispers in the night. Strength and peace, no need to fight. Winners walk in soft embrace. No battle scars, no deadly taste. Silent shadows trace the ground. In this silence we are bound. Greatest victory found with ease. No need to fight, no need to seize. Silent shadows trace the ground. In this silence we are bound. Greatest victory found with ease. No need to fight, no need to seize. In the still night whispers float. In the quiet heartbeats slow. No clash, no roar, just silence. In the shadows battles won. I see through foggy veils. No swords to raise, no cries to wail. Victory's touch in ghostly hue. Darkness glows a pale blue. Silent shadows trace the ground. In this silence we are bound. Greatest victory found with ease. No need to fight, no need to seize. Creeping through the twisted wood. Echo shards where warriors stood. Just a breath, just a wish. No more war, no final fist. Wisdom whispers in the night. Strength and peace, no need to fight. Winners walk in soft embrace. No battle scars, no deadly taste. Silent shadows trace the ground. In this silence we are bound. Greatest victory found with ease. No need to fight, no need to seize. Silent shadows trace the ground. In this silence we are bound. Greatest victory found with ease. No need to fight, no need to seize. In the still night whispers float. In the quiet heartbeats slow. No clash, no roar, just silence. In the shadows battles won. I see through foggy veils. No swords to raise, no cries to wail. Victory's touch in ghostly hue. Darkness.
Hello and welcome to Mr. Bitey's Games and Hobbies. My name is Jace. We're going to be talking about adversaries today for the Shattered World. I'm the editor and secondary writer for all this shenanigans, and hope that you'll join us for some good times as I talk about all this. Some of the biggest mechanics in the game being the very flexible system for creating your enemies that can be done on the fly, and of course we'll have a lot of presets so that narrators can just throw them at your players. Right here we have our cover of our book, perspective book, and we're going to be using Foundry that we've been working on as a digital system to implement so that eventually, once the book comes out, players will be able to use a digital tabletop system to make use of all the craziness. It's a work in progress and a labor of love. With only two of us working together, everything's a little bit slow. I know we mention that every single time, but as a good reminder, we're working as quickly as we can. So, to get right down to the meat of it, I'm going to be open up our adversaries. Uh, and here I've got loaded. A while back, we had done a preview of some of our adversaries that we have right now. For the core book, it will probably be somewhere around 30 just in this core book. Although we'll have a complete system for people to mess around with, change things, and it is important to note that this system is made with the intent that if something does not fit with your idea of how it should be, and we've pulled from a lot of our world mythologies and things like that, even pop culture. So if something doesn't fit, almost on the fly, you can switch out uh, bits and pieces of these adversaries so that you can make what you find interesting for the players and what they find interesting to run into. So right here we have just a couple of examples, um, and we'll jump right into it. So these are in the works, and keep in mind this is incomplete. We've only taken some of the most notable sections of this is to give you an accurate depiction of how it's going to turn out. It's still, like I said, a work in progress, but as we move along, we'll update everybody, and we hope that this gives a really good picture of how things are going to come together as a modern dark tactical setting. All right. So first off, we have adversary categories. Now these are sort of how enemies are grouped together in what their types. Like, say you're going to run into other organizational uh, enemies. People that you're going against. So they would probably have the humanoid, which is your standard two arms, two legs, a head, torso, etc. Like your standard person is just going to be a humanoid, which is not really going to be necessarily beneficial or detrimental in any sort of way, but it's a sort of baseline. Next up is going to be organic, which again, say you're going against another enemy from a different organization, they're going to have this sort of tag, your standard person. That entails they get sick, they need to eat, feel pain, subject to all your standard issues that comes with being a person. Now, that's not always going to be true. Maybe you're fighting against a drone somebody's piloting. They will probably, excuse me, not have organic. But that brings us to the next one, inorganic. It's for creatures or entities that mostly entirely are made of non-living material or matter. Again, like a drone, or maybe something that's made of rock, is an example. Next up is bestial. This is for animalistic creatures with limited intelligence. Some a wild dog that you might come across, or maybe something that has been reduced in intelligence might gain this tag, uh, and they might have almost always have some sort of bestial weaponry, which is claws, teeth. A werewolf would definitely have this when they're like just going berserk. Uh, that will also affect their intelligence further. Now, this one mentions having a single minded negative impact. We'll get into impacts later, but those are the positive and negative things that will affect your adversaries. They either boost or hinder in some way. We'll get into that more. Now, a curse. This specifically is for things like urban legends, ill will, something that is manifested either from a person or terrible emotions. There are plenty of legends about those sort of things, like a witch is cursed, or um, anything that still lingers, like a tulpa or a thought form, uh, is in plenty of urban legends where somebody wants to hurt somebody else, and it's not so much of a summoning as that they're creating this malicious force to go do somebody's will. That's for that sort of thing. They might have different types of uh, traits to them. Not really, it may be intelligent, but almost always based off of having some sort of purpose. Now we have lingering. Uh, this is basically our version of undead. They're sticking around after they definitely should not be. Uh, Living creatures where spirit lingers on count as what most would call undead. As I said, entails of creatures that, while they may be organic, do not necessarily need to sleep, though they may need some kind of other rest period and function off of different types of sustenance. Like a zombie might need to eat flesh, brains. They do not suffer the effect of disease, but might also be carriers of a disease. Like zombies, for example, might turn other people into the same sort of thing. Now, again, as we're moving forward, some of these we have not given a full. They're to be decided as far as how we're going to uh, group some of these as we work on additional adversaries to be in the book. Onto conceptual. These are similar to curse, except they're not generally so malevolent. So again, a tulpa might be similar, but not so much of a malevolence. They will have some different features to them, manifestations of ideas, concepts. Land spirits might be uh, an example of this. If anybody's ever seen Princess Mononoke, those little Kadama spirits that are part of the land, probably would be in line with that sort of thing. Next, we have into technological. This is often, but not necessarily, included regarding inorganic. May include other categories, but is primarily composed of wires, chips, and various modern technologies. That drone falls right in line with this. These ones are specifically very weak to electrical type of damage.
In the still night, whispers float. In the quiet, heartbeats slow. No clash, no roar, just silence. In the shadows, battles won. I see through foggy veils, no swords to raise, no cries to wail. Victory's touching ghostly hue. Darkness glows a pale blue. Silent shadows trace the ground. In this silence we are bound. Greatest victory found with ease. No need to fight, no need to cease. Creeping through the twisted wood, echoes shards where warriors stood. Just a breath, just a wish. No more war, no final fist. Wisdom whispers in the night. Strength in peace, no need to fight. Witness walk in soft embrace. No battle scars, no deadly taste.
thoughtful. Now, this was one that we had proposed, but we have not completely settled on language as far as how we're going to present these sorts of things. In addition, mythos, which is those grandiose creatures of legend. Think Cthulhu would be something like that. Those grand legends or mythological heroes of, like say Joan of Arc is summoned in some fashion to represent one of the adversaries. Like those grand concepts are perfect for this sort of thing and will have their own limitations and abilities. Next, we're going to be getting into grouping categories. Now, a single, that would be okay, you're going to run into one of these things. It doesn't have any inherent pack tactics, and even against a group of them, it's just counted as a single creature effectively. Now you have pack. We're talking like packs of dogs, or things that sort of work together, but not necessarily like a whole swarm, like hive mentality. Not quite that. Now they get some inherent bonuses from this, um, and they need at least two creatures to be able to form this sort of pack. So if you can reduce their numbers, they'll lose that inherent bonus. And it is affected by a particular pack leader. So if you also defeat the pack leader, you will also reduce the ability of the rest of said pack. Onto Swarm. Now, again, going right back to some sort of bee-sized or, maybe something, a swarm of little tooth fairy type creatures. These work in an extremely coordinated fashion. They all sort of act as a single adversary, but they gain inherent bonuses for being um, a single swarm. They would gain the destructive 2 positive impacts for free, which would mean as a swarm, they would be that much deadlier. Because normally, without any modifications on the adversary side, an adversary would have 2 actions to get in combat, which is a little bit different than your average enhanced or a PC who starts out with 3 as a base and then goes up from there depending on your attributes. Nope, an adversary is not as good as a PC. Now, that is a design choice so that you can make them more deadly, and sometimes, and this is not a game of high HP. You're not going to typically have 100 HP to soak a bunch of damage. This is deadly combat. Every bit of damage matters. So the more actions that an adversary has, it makes them much more deadly. Um, but also at the same time, for a swarm, uh, defeating 5 out of a swarm of 100 is not going to be nearly as effective. You're going to need to use some area effects, grenades or some of your destiny abilities that hit an entire area. Those are more effective on these. Now, we're going to move on to squad. This is sort of medium, your average person sized, uh, fairly organized. We're talking like a group of soldiers, things like that, where they have training and intelligence. That means they're going to get some sort of impact for free based off of whatever your narrator decides is appropriate, and they can perform a single combat maneuver for free every turn, like each of these person. That means that they have much more options that they can do during combat. They have to have at least 2, but it's a maximum of 5. We've limited that for balancing reasons, so that they're not doing some crazy stuff in the middle of things. Though a narrator can always is the final uh, we'll say arbiter as far as okay, this adversary has this sort of thing. But remember, this is a very collaborative game. You're telling a story together. It is never going to be a storyteller versus your players. Now, if you like those sorts of games, you're more than welcome as a narrator and your players to work that out and incorporate that in. But as far as our mentality, we wanted things to be very collaborative and to have fun. Again, this is sort of a dangerous game, and sometimes your players are just going to get overwhelmed with enemies, with your adversaries. Sometimes it happens, and sometimes you may end up with a party wipe. But again, that's a story sort of element, and they always have a tactical options to them. They can your players can barricade themselves in. They can set up traps. They can change the battlefield in order to best suit their needs. But at the same time, some adversaries can do that exact same thing. Now, moving on to a horde. This is that overwhelming group of monsters. It's a large set that can work in tandem with each other. So it's bigger than a swarm, or maybe multiple swarms together. It'll have its own resistances, and it can target single target. It'll have the horde resistances single target twice, allowing them to resist damage except for area effects. So while they are particularly a swarm would be particularly vulnerable, now you absolutely have to use area effects in order to defeat a horde. Onto echelons. Now I know some people pronounce it differently. This is based on like military term as far as a sort of a ranking goes. Uh, this is still a work in progress as we figure out the right combination of things, the right language, so that everybody feels comfortable in order to do this. But at the same time, when narrators mess with their adversaries, this is one of the biggest options that they have in order to increase or decrease the overall power level of a particular adversary. Alpha being currently the weakest and deemed typically a low threat, usually unintelligent. Um, and by this, when you create an adversary or when you have an adversary, they are first determined as a particular level of difficulty. Now, this could be anywhere from between 1 to we don't have a particular max right now as we still continue to work on the balancing issues, but say between 1 and 10 as a base. And then you choose their echelon, and for that, you're going to improve their difficulty. So, say you have 2, an adversary of difficulty 2, times 1 for the attributes. So that means their base attributes for 2, difficulty 2 adversary, will start at 2. Now this will be modified by the different positive and negative impacts that you're going to give them, but that is your baseline. And then the next part, the skills that the particular alpha is treated as having, is as a rookie. That means if it has a particular skill, an alpha is treated as having 1 rank in that particular skill. Onto beta. So it's a little bit more deadly, somewhat more intelligent, and sort of an average level creature. Now, when you choose your difficulty, like again, going with 2, you're going to multiply that by 1.5 for its attributes in round. So if it's going to go up to a 3 base. And for this, when they have a particular skill, it will be treated as competent. That means it will be treated as it having 3 ranks in a particular skill. So if you have again that soldier that is a rank 2 beta, it will have, you know, a base 3 ferocity as an example, and then its skill in say firearms will be 3. So it's going to start at an inherent 6 plus the 2d12s in order to make its attack. Now that's going to get modified by equipment or further impacts, but that gives you an overall sense of how it might fare in a particular situation. Now, because how many skills they have is limited, its other abilities aren't going to be quite as impressive or unimpressive, depending on how powered your uh, players are. On to Charlie. Now, this is a significant threat and an exceptional specimen. So, those pack leaders or special creatures that you want to have as maybe like maybe you have 4 or 5 regular creatures, and then you've got that one that's just, that's the boss creature for that particular room. As an example, you might bump that one up to Charlie. And what that's going to do is taking again that difficulty 2, you're going to multiply by that 2. So as an inherent, it's going to start with all its attributes at 4. And then skills is going to be treated as an expert, which is 5 ranks. So again, going back to the build of this Charlie soldier, maybe a squad captain, something like that. So it's going to start with 4 for its ferocity, um, and then its skill is going to be treated as 5. So it's going to have a base 10. So you can have an encounter with enemies of multiple echelons. So 2 alpha levels, 1 Charlie, and a couple of betas. You absolutely can mix and match, and that may affect how dangerous a particular encounter is. Our beginner box is going to be as set as a beginner adventure, but you may mix and match all sorts of things. You can mix a couple of really weak creatures in there for players to mow down, have that uh, absolute sense of power, and then as you go along, you can have a Charlie level. That will probably be your beta. So, uh, a squad of those soldiers that you're mixing in of different levels. You've got your base grunts. Those will be your alphas. Those are easy to mow down. Um, uh, your easy people. Then you've got a couple of betas. They're a little bit tougher, and then you've got that squad boss, that Charlie level. Now they're all this effectively the same creature. However, they all represent different abilities, and you can feel free as a narrator to switch out any of the abilities on the fly. These are all going to be what we're going to present as a sort of template, which you'll be able to use to create your own. And we definitely welcome any feedback as far as cool stuff that you guys might want to show us, or submit to us, um, when we get that sort of thing up and running. But then you back to it where you've got that Charlie level. That one will be a significant difficulty improvement. But yes, you will be able to mix and match encounters in any fashion that you want, in power levels, uh, their impacts. It the system is meant to be uh, so fluid that you can do almost any sort of creature, any sort of power level, with a bunch of abilities that will potentially be dangerous, or you can hinder them so that maybe they might be really powerful and ferocious, but maybe the creature is very stupid, and it will benefit you to target its mental abilities. It's going to be very modular. as the term, our specific term, just like that we're using for our equipment system. Everything in the system is meant to be fluid and modular. You can switch out on the fly as needed, or between rests, for like weapons and stuff like that. And for this, um, your adversaries, meant to be easily done. Now for the last one, Delta, that we've thought of. This one is an absolutely dangerous monster, and you want to be careful throwing Delta creatures at, say, your initially built uh, players, your enhanced, because this thing, we're talking its attributes are times 3. Now I know that was a little bit of a jump from a 2 to 3, uh, as you test this out. These are meant for much larger creatures. You know, you're going to throw one as a very specific boss, and your players are probably going to focus all of their abilities, all of their deadliness onto this one Delta creature. Now, that may not be always the case, but as a good example. Now, we're talking like a whole squadron commander. This guy is really high rank. He's powerful. He knows what he's doing. He's been around a long time. He's very experienced. His difficulty will be, let's set that to back to 2. But as a delta, his inherent difficulty that he'll start with is a 2 multiplied by 3. His and all his attributes are going to be at 6. So already he's gotten a huge advantage compared to everything else, to all his other buddies. And his skills, if he has them, will be treated as the pinnacle at 7 ranks. So this guy, starting out with that same firearms example, he starts out with that 6, which is typically, say for a PC, is, you know, they've devoted some stuff to getting an attribute of 6, and their firearms all the way up. Um,
In the still night, whispers float. In the quiet, heartbeat slow. No clash, no roar, just silence. In the shadows, battles won. I see through foggy veils, no swords to raise, no cries to wail. Victory's touching ghostly hue. Darkness glows a pale blue. Silent shadows trace the ground. In this silence we are bound. Greatest victory found with ease. No need to fight, no need to cease. Creeping through the twisted wood, echo shards where warriors stood. Just a breath, just a wish. No more war, no final fist. Wisdom whispers in the night. Strength in peace, no need to fight. Witness walk in soft embrace. No battle scars, no deadly taste. Silent shadows trace the ground. In this silence we are bound. Greatest victory found with ease. No need to fight, no need to cease. Silent shadows trace the ground. In this silence we are bound. Greatest victory found with ease. No need to fight, no need to cease. In the still night, whispers float. In the quiet, heartbeat clash, no roar, just silence. In the shadows, battles won. I see through foggy veils, no swords to raise, no cries to wail. Victory's touching ghostly hue. Darkness glows a pale blue. Silent shadows trace the ground. In this silence we are bound. Greatest victory found with ease. No need to fight, no need to cease. Creeping through the twisted wood, echo shards where warriors stood. Just a breath, just a wish. No more war, no final fist. Wisdom whispers in the night. Strength in peace, no need to fight. Winners walk in soft embrace. No battle scars, no deadly taste. Silent shadows trace the ground. In this silence we are bound. Greatest victory found with ease. No need to fight, no need to cease. Silent shadows trace the ground. In this silence we are bound. Greatest victory found with ease. No need to fight, no need to cease. In the still night whispers float. In the quiet heartbeat slow. No clash, no roar, just silence. In the shadows, battles won. I see through foggy veils. No swords to raise, no cries to wail. Victory's touching ghostly hue. Darkness glows a pale blue. Silent shadows trace the ground. In this silence we are bound. Greatest victory found with ease. No need to fight, no need to cease. Creeping through the twisted wood, echo shards where warriors stood. Just a breath, just a wish. No more war, no final fist. Wisdom whispers in.
That will, as we had said before, that will impact its how dangerous it is. And that can range very dramatically depending on what you do with it. Now you have the base difficulty. And we've included origin because we like to include that sort of things that we've researched and include it. And again, this is, we wanted to do a lot with our real world myths, and because everything in this world, a mix of magic and technology, everything exists in some form or another in these terrors where nobody has explored, things coming through to our side, our stuff going over to there. Things exist and people wrote about it. We wanted to include that stuff and do that justice to them and with all due respect, um, because all cultures have a place and they're to be respected, and we wanted to do that without any sort of crazy stereotypes that has been in other systems or just over on the world, and we wanted to share in that with everybody. And then we're on to attributes, which includes the standard attributes. Uh, oh, apologies if things have gone back to the starting now um, screen. There are some technical issues as we were doing dual screens where I'm at my computer and the other guy, Alan, is also uh, streaming what I'm streaming. So there may be some slight technical issues, but we're trying to stay on with it. Uh, I hope it's being interesting with everybody. Hope you guys are enjoying it. But as going back, oh yes, please let us know. That's Alan in there. He's keeping an eye on the chat. Now onto the attributes, which are going to be the exact same as for an enhanced person. The ferocity, that is our. We want to make sure that you guys know that strength is not ferocity. It is not how hard you're going to hit, but it is your willingness to damage something else. So that as a specific uh, deviation from other systems that we're taking inspiration. This one particular, um, judging your actions, how focused you are on injuring somebody. Then we have agility, which is going to has to do with your movement and things like that. Your endurance, which is going to affect their stamina and wounds, which we'll get into in a second. Then we've got mental acuity, how intelligent they are. Then we have their resolve, which is going to be how willful they are, essentially. And onto stamina, which is going to affect their health, which is the next bracket where we have stamina and wounds. Now, just like uh, players are enhanced people, they have a certain amount of stamina and then they have a certain amount of wounds. Uh, the adversaries in this particular, their amount of wounds is based off of their echelon. So they may have a certain amount of stamina, which is going to be our basic health, based off of how what their stamina is, but then their wounds is based off of the echelon. So if they have everything has a it's dead box. That's just a flat. But based off of echelon, they will have start with an extra two wounds, and then for beta they will have three. Charlie four, and then for delta they will have the full five that any enhanced player would have. So again, you're ramping up a difficulty in multiple levels, in multiple ways, just by using a single factor like the echelons. Now, you're always welcome to lower a difficulty, raise a difficulty. You can raise the difficulty, but then lower an echelon. And then you can change up the positive and negative impacts. So on this template, we have it right there. And then afterwards, there's going to be a description, which is a sort of a general couple of sentences that talks about your adversary. But we try to keep those to a minimum so that it's not going on. Although we may do full description blocks to include other features, like they may have special weaponry that they get, or armor, or to just otherwise more develop your adversary. Then you have equipment, which is involved in it if that adversary has any sort of equipment. Now, onto adversary impacts. This is one of the meat and potatoes of this system. So, they are how adversaries are set up and they're modified, and it's pretty much on the fly, as we said. Meant to be modular, allowing a narrator to quickly change out an adversary for any occasion and create an entirely new, almost on the spot. This is broken up into two distinct types, and they are tracked separately. That is the positive impacts, which improve your adversaries, and then you have negative impacts, which pretty self-explanatory. They negatively impact your adversary, which they lower stats, they give weaknesses, they may hinder, take away a movement, or give a penalty in some fashion. But by their very nature, they weaken your adversary. Now, you can always add those, and the more negative impacts that you give an adversary, this also can be used to then give them positive impacts in the same way. So, for each negative impact they have, they gain a positive impact to do something with it. Um, and unless a impact specifically says, or its tag specifically says, you can only have a particular tag of that same name once. So there's no taking a bunch. Now, some of these, by its inherent abilities, like we had said on some of the categories, it may gain a particular positive impact for free multiple times that is independent of these impact tags. So let's start with the boost. These will improve your particular attribute, and it anything with this particular tag can only be taken once for each echelon. So if it's an alpha, it can only take a particular one that is a boost once, and we'll get into those pretty shortly. Hindrance, these decrease a particular one, and again, uh, as a negative impact with this tag can only be taken once for echelon. So again, that alpha can only take this -1 penalty to an attribute once. Aura, and this is going to line up pretty well with an aura tag for players, in which they can only have it requires one action to activate, and has a base coverage of 2 squares in all directions, and they may only have one aura active at a time. So what that means is they have to do an action, and they might have a surprise action, or if they have their own uh, preparations in place. You may start an encounter with something already having an aura activated, but as a general rule, it requires them to spend one of their actions to put it into place. Now you have an alteration, uh, which modifies something else, like it might modify one of their auras, as an example. You must have an associated impact to pair up with it. If they lose access to that initial one, they also, you know, lose access to it. It's sort of a uh, chain, and if you break that chain, you're not going to be able to do it. Now, traversal. This is your standard movement sort of thing. Walking, climbing, running, flying, teleporting. Those are the sorts of things. By default, we have the traversal positive impact is grounded movement. That is going to be something that pretty much everything, as a standard rule, will have. And then if they have a different traversal, they can use that one in place of this one, or might lose it entirely. The grounded movement. That's your standard walking. Then you have composition. This is their general makeup of an adversary, and may only have a single impact tag with this and a single negative. So what this means is they might have a living shadow positive impact, and that's going to affect um, how they react to their environment, how difficult they are to defeat, because they may not be entirely physical. So they might inherently have a resistance to physical damage in some way, but they might also be uh, weak to light or fire or some other thing. It is just a general descriptor of uh, something that changes their physical body. Now, again, this is not the entire listing. This is only a portion of those. As we give a demonstration of these, we're working on more to be a more comprehensive system. But these are a good set of them to give you an understanding of what we're working with. Now, on to positive impacts. Again, it is a sort of one for one basis, and again, starting with that DC2. uh, squad member that we've been using as an example. So say you want to make them more ferocious, that give them a +1 to their ferocity. Um, that would make them much more considerably deadlier in combat as they swing that sword, shoot that gun. But again, if it's an alpha, it can only take that particular impact once as a sort of a limitation. Now, if it was a beta echelon, it would be able to take that particular tag or that particular impact twice. And onto these are fairly self-explanatory in regards to uh, what they do. We tried to keep them fairly simple, straightforward. And just because I have not written down their limits or requirements, it doesn't mean that there won't be in the future and as we get into the game. But as a general rule, what how we're going to be writing things up, um, uh, that it will have those just in case. We may fill those in with like none as far as requirements or limits, what it requires. We're still working on the language. Now, as I go down through these, vivacious, hardy, these are your standard +1 to your attributes for an adversary. These are probably the most common ways that you're going to just build out, improve, uh, or create something to be how you feel. If, say, you have some imp and you feel it's particular hardy and dangerous, you could easily make it that way, or you could make it particular dumb by giving it the opposite, where it has a negative impact that lowers its mental acuity. So astute being that sort of thing, resolve, vigorous, stamina. Now here is another one, destructive, that may or may not be common among creatures, and this is your positive impact that will improve how many actions it has. Creature and going back, regardless of how much ferocity an adversary has, unlike your player characters, the enhanced, their amount of actions is not based off of ferocity for an adversary. It is, like we said, unless otherwise noted. This destructive positive impact is going to be what gets you a much more actions in combat, and gains an additional action per turn for each time. So that alpha that has destructive is going to start with 3. A beta, uh, it could potentially have this um, positive impact twice, and it can if it takes it twice, it will have 4 actions, but at the cost of of not having other impacts. Thick hide. This is one that gives its bonus armor to bonus. I'm sorry, a bonus to armor. I can talk, I promise. This can be bypassed with armor-piercing weapons, abilities, or other impacts. So this effect is basically like a rhino hide sort of thing, but can be penetrated, depending on your equipment, things like that. Then you have damage resistance, and this is a form of resistance to a particular type of attack and is defined when they take this impact. So, and it's going to be an example, fire resistance to fire. And the tag for this, we'll get into the negative tags as a negation. That is the particular tag that we've given for resistances to stopping bad things from happening to the adversary. Onto bestial weaponry. Again, this might be one of the more common ones because, uh, you know, uh, everything not as a person often will have teeth, claws, some form of way of attacking, but this is in addition to how deadly something is. And we also have an example of what that particular bestial weapon might be. Um, you gain an additional unarmed weapon, which will use the unarmed skills, or the particular focus, and may have more than once. Now, this specifically says it may have more than once. Oh, looks like we're getting plenty of bots today. Thank you for taking care of that. Whack-a-mole, that's true. Um, so again, this one says specifically it can have multiple times, so that's independent of the type of echelon it is. And as an example of a bestial weaponry, it tags a natural, that's teeth, claws, stinger, something like that. And its base damage is +0. So it's just going to be based off of the ferocity um, for that adversary. Now, there are other things, such as bestial weaponry improved, which will count as an augment to that bestial weaponry, and it will be inherently tied to that one. It'll gain a +1 bonus uh, to using that attack. So, when it's, say, it's a claws, it will have its particular ferocity plus the skill used to attack, and then it will gain an additional +1 bonus, much in the same way that you would get bonuses for particular equipment. Onto Charming Aura. This is your standard vampire's gaze, where it lures people in to doing its bidding. You know, you know, or like a Jedi doing the Jedi trick. It emits an aura of charm. Adversary and all allied adversaries within 5 squares, that is a radius, um, will gain a +2 bonus on all checks involving empathy, leadership, and persuasion skills. So that means it is inherently much easier for them to get you over to do something that they want. Open a door, drop their weapon, hit a switch, that sort of thing. And you could absolutely do any sort of creatures that sort of gets people to open up doors for them, and then the monster attacks them. Very classic Bram Stoker's Dracula, like that. We have Expanding Aura, an alteration, uh, and this again would be connected to any other positive impact with the aura tag. Um, and by sheer force of will, an adversary may use an additional action. So remember, they've already used an action to put up this aura. Now they're using a second action to increase this paired aura by an additional 2 squares in all directions, but only once each round. So it's giving up the actions in order to focus its attention on this aura. And auras, depending on other triggers, you might be able to deactivate an adversary's aura, just like potentially a player's aura from some of their tarot destiny abilities might get deactivated. Then you have to reactivate them. It's a one of those tactical advantage sort of things where if you force an adversary to focus on one thing and then you take that away from them, now they've got to start from the beginning. It's one of those tactical advantages. On to Draining. Now this is one that we've shown to be a little bit dangerous in some of our playtests, and it is also tied to a bestial weaponry or a manifested weaponry impact tag or impact, which we'll get to shortly. And it will be comprised of a number, which is the amount drained, depending on how many times they have this impact. And when struck with this particular attack, an adversary may spend one additional action to drain its victim and regain that much stamina. So it takes away an additional amount of damage, and it gives you back that. So, say again, going back to a vampire who may have that bestial weaponry inherent in it of fangs, and it may have draining. So, if it's bitten you with this bite attack, it may now spend an additional one of its actions in order to suck you dry with the draining, and then it will do additional damage and then heal that much itself. Now that may have, it may take you down. There may be other factors in which, if an enhanced is killed due to a draining attack, other things might happen, um, and we'll set those up at some point. But as an example, a vampire is a good example of this draining attack. Now onto manifested weaponry. That is, they are able to create in some fashion, psychically, magically, create a weapon out of power manifested, and it costs a single action, similar to drawing a weapon. And it would gain all the traits of a weapon of a particular type, can be destroyed, disarmed, but then it can be remanifested for a single action. So, say you have somebody that is able to manifest this really cool sword. You can still destroy it, you can still disarm them, but then they will be able to remanifest it in the exact same way that it was before it was broken, or say it's taken away. Um, this might make them particularly dangerous if, say, they're captured. They might be able to remanifest their weapon, and then it's really good for always having something on hand. Onto skillful. Now, this is another really good one for improving your adversaries at various different abilities. Uh, it would gain 2 additional skills above and beyond the amount of skills that it gets just for being, say, difficulty 2. At difficulty 2, it gains 2 skills. Now, with this, using one of its positive impacts to gain 2 additional skills, now it's good at a lot more things, and because it has the boost tag, how many times it can take this is dependent on its echelon. But instead of taking that tag, that positive impact, that makes it more dangerous as far as ferocity or more health for stamina. Now it has more skills to draw on, and those skills are dependent on the echelon too, on how skilled they are. So if they are a Charlie, all of those skills are going to be counted as uh, rank 5 at that level. So it is much more skilled, more options, whether it's, using melee firearms, melee, whether it's going to be using leadership to boost other adversaries, using empathy. It has more options to choose from skill wise. Heightened senses is, a standard one where so many myths talk about how they can see in the dark clearly, going back to, vampires. Um, Animals often can see better than humans. This is going to give them a +1 to perception for for each of its senses. It can hear better, it can see better. It's going to be less unawares. Onto flyer. That's going to be one of our traversal ones where they gain an ability to fly, hover, or otherwise be mobile without needing to touch the ground. This is, you know, uh, whether it's wings, whether it's flight, you can spin this in so many different ways, and there are so many different types of lore out there where, say, a vampire can float, or they can fly, manifest wings. And it's so fluid that you can spin it in any way that a narrator would like to. Um, and it can move its full movement horizontally or half vertically. This is to indicate that it takes a little bit more effort to go upwards than it does just, horizontally. That's just Earth's gravity. Um, Onto grounded movement. This is going to be your standard. I move, I walk, 15 feet across the room, that sort of thing. That's pretty standard. Onto climber. That's like, you got monkey hands, you climbing up a wall, or something that spiders can climb walls, uh, that sort of thing, which makes it inherently easier where they don't have to expend much more effort. They wouldn't have to make a check in order to climb, uh, a wall or up the side of a house. Uh, they're just inherently better at doing that. It can move its full movement along a surface. And then subject to checks is needed for difficulty based off of whether it's slick or other factors that the storyteller can mess around in there. Now, on to this next one where it's Greater Destiny. This is one that we've included because we wanted the option for potentially adversaries to make use of Destiny abilities. These are the really cool Tarot Destiny abilities that Enhance get to use. But we are keeping it limited in such a way that they're not going to just be able to spam out these crazy abilities. Um, they can call upon them, and this is going to be based off of echelon as well. Like alpha echelon adversaries may choose a single tier 1 ability. Beta adversaries may choose up to a tier 2. Charlie adversaries may choose up to a tier 3. And Delta adversaries may choose up to a tier 4. Um, Again, cannot stress out how the difficulty may ramp depending on the echelon. Giving a Delta, which is already very powerful, a tier 4 ability could potentially cause issues, but also be absolutely dramatic in that you can show off just how deadly it is, and then players can come back when they're better equipped or they have done some tactical planning and then come in and do their job. But it also shows off a great storytelling mechanic. Now, the adversary must qualify for the Destiny ability. You can't just give it something that has nothing to do with it or that it wouldn't have, because some of the Tarot Destiny abilities are also alterations or auras. And if they don't have those things, like if it's an alteration, it's not going to benefit them in any way. So they have to qualify for what ability that you're giving them, including all tags. Uh, it can only be taken once for each echelon category. That means an alpha is only ever going to be able to take this once, regardless of its difficulty. Up to Delta, who at most will ever be able to take this 4 times. And again, you may overbalance it, but then that's also at the cost of any other cool um, positive impacts that they have. So you have to pick and choose what cool stuff you want them to have. Cannot be used to gain any ability that uses the champion tag. That specifically will be champion tag is a type of uh, ability that summons another creatures. So you will not be able to give this particular tarot ability, which uses the champion tag, which summons another creature. So we've specifically already wrote that one out so that you're not creating an adversary that then creates another adversary that then creates another adversary. We've seen that in other systems, and that would go crazy. Yes, another thing that we wanted to address, cover would be opportunity cost and FOMO is absolutely a real thing. Your fear of missing out, players have to deal with it. So do adversaries. So it is they give up something cool to take something else cool, and then it changes their options, changes the narrator's options. So you can absolutely have 5 imps, and every single one of those imps might be completely different in what abilities that they have. One might be more ferocious, one might be more skillful, one might be able to fly, one might be able to tank more damage. And it's easy to switch out one or both of their positive impacts as you go along. Um, The positive impact does not grant any additional benefits such as stamina. Such typically enhanced players when they gain more abilities than their Tarot Destiny abilities, they they gain more stamina. That is not true when they take this Greater Destiny ability. So uh, that is something inherent to show they are not the same as enhanced. In addition, an adversary may use each ability of its once that it has once per day. So it's not going to be spamming all its crazy abilities. It gets one use in that one encounter, which generally you're probably going to take that enemy out. It's not going to get a chance to do that. But say that enemy gets away, and then you encounter it in another combat, it can use that ability. Onto Swimmer, another traversal. This is, it can move in liquids such as water without having to make any checks. Normally, all creatures, when they're in water that's deep enough to impede movement, will require a swim check. Your enhanced have to do that unless they somehow have it. But these, with this particular ability, uh, you know, if you run into an adversary, a shark type creature, it can just move through the water without any difficulty. That's its main thing. Of course, it's also not probably not going to have grounded movement. Um, Now, this does not give it any resistance by virtue of what it is. So, no resistance to heat and cold, such as lava or ice. Pretty self explanatory on that one. Now, here is a good example of a composition tag, Living Shadow, that I mentioned earlier. We have a particular adversary that we'll cover called Shadow People. This is one that would have that, and it grants the adversary the ability to become incorporeal shadow. Using one action, it can assume this form. It gains the Climber positive impact, which means it can now move up walls, um, and then and ectoplasmic positive impact, which is um, uh, another thing that it will have an impact on the environment, which means it will have resistances in some way. But it also, in addition, gains the sunlight weakness negative impact without gaining an additional positive impact. So this is sort of an all-encompassing. If it has this tag as a positive impact, it can only have this one positive impact, and by virtue of when it uses it, it now gains the positive climbing positive impact for free along with the ectoplasmic, but it also gains this negative one. They sort of cancel each other out by using this particular one. Technology possession. This is one that we're still working on the tags. Uh, um, and it grants the adversary the ability to shed its form and possess an item of technology. So basically, it sort of becomes ethereal, and then it takes over something like a phone, control panel, computer, something, and it's now possess it. It can operate the item at will, bypassing the security on it with a successful mental acuity plus technology versus the victim's mental acuity plus technology. So, say it tries to take over your phone. In order for it to bypass the security and take over this uh, phone and use it however it wants, call up your mom or whatever, it has to make a check versus your use of technology. So your how secure you've made this phone. The adversary must physically touch the item. So it's going to have to touch that phone that it's trying to take over. And if the object is broken while the adversary is possessing it, so say it does get taken over, a person has the option of, well, they can just break their phone. Um, it ends immediately, um, and they are ejected, taking 2 points of occult damage and cannot be reduced. But now that player no longer has that cool toy. However, the possession grants the item an additional +2 to its durability. So, by just sheer effect of it possessing it, and it'll probably want to be subtle about it, but say the player figures it out and it tries to break it, it'll be harder to break that item. So it's one of those balancing sort of things where gives adversaries some cool options. So, like possessing their gun is something that they can do, and maybe an adversary might try to turn it on a player, but then that player doesn't want that to happen, and they have to go through a whole thing. Maybe they spend actions ejecting the clips or disabling the weapon in some fashion. It's again a tactical option. On to shapeshifting. Now, this grants the adversary an ability to change into a particular form, and it is always specified when they take this shapeshifting positive tag. So, say they have this positive tag, they want to shapeshift into a bat. Now, they are able to change into that form, and it is the same every time. It cannot appear as a specific person, but it does allow them to have an alternate identity. So, if you're going to turn into a bat, it's always going to be a brown bat or a white bat or something that looks exactly the same every single time. Um, but then they also gain a +5 bonus to their disguise as a normal creature. So, say you're going to, this adversary is going to stalk a neighborhood and it turns into a cat, a gray cat. It looks the same every single time, but anybody looking at it is just going to think, oh, it's a gray neighborhood cat, and just sort of shrug. Now they lose any bestial weaponry that they had in their initial form, but they gain 2 positive impacts related to their new form for that sort of thing. We're talking they might gain bestial weaponry, they might gain flyer, they might gain swimming, that sort of thing. Swimmer, excuse me. This positive impact may be taken more than once to give additional forms. Now, again, this positive impact specifically says it can be taken more than once, regardless of echelon. Uh, so it may be used for an alternate persona of a humanoid creature, but the features are the same. So it might, change to look like an older person. It might look to a younger person. It might turn into a child, that sort of thing. But that alternate persona looks the same every single time. So as soon as somebody figures out that alternate identity, somebody might have some questions. All right. Now on to improved shapeshifting. Now this one is like what I had mentioned before, where that sort of ladder effect, where you have that shapeshifting. Now you can also take improved shapeshifting, and it is going to be linked to that specific form that you chose it for. And now when you use that specific form, it now receives 3 positive impacts related to that form. This form also gives a +8 bonus to convince others it is a normal creature. So that gray cat now has more positive impacts. Maybe it's faster. Maybe it has, some sort of venom, which normally it wouldn't, but it might have that. Maybe it's more skillful. And it can mimic the appearance of any humanoid creature that is of the same base shifting form. So if you have shapeshifting form and you have an alternate form of, say, a person, like another humanoid creature, now with improved shapeshifting, now you can take that other alternate identity, and now you can shift it to look like, your buddy, or you can look like another person that you're fighting. So now, uh, maybe one of your squad mates enters the room and it sees its buddy and a copy of the buddy, and now it doesn't know which one is which. They might have other difficulties with that. Onto illusions. This is, your standard lore illusion type things where they're making things that aren't really there. They can generate illusions that may target up to 3 senses at a time, such as sight, sound, taste, attempting to trick a particular victim. It takes a -1 penalty to the difficulty for the victim's resolve plus perception versus the adversary's mental acuity plus performance. Success for the victim means they disbelieve the entirety of the illusion. So once they get past it, they know, hey, this thing is not real. Onto Charming Gaze, which is similar to Charming Aura that we have. So this is a much more targeted attempt to get somebody to do what they want. They gain an attack, which may be performed for 2 actions. So again, unless they have that destructive positive impact, an adversary is probably going to use their entire turn in order to sort of charm your buddy or you. They can attempt to capture the gaze of a single victim within 10 steps. So that's a pretty decent across the room, depending on how big a room is. And opposed by victim's resolve plus perception. So how easily they can see through it versus an adversary's resolve plus empathy. How well they can convey that uh, they're in the right. The victim may choose for no actions to take a -2 penalty to their defense for the turn, which is going to say that other people might hit them more easily by looking away from this creature, but gaining a +2 bonus versus this particular opposed check. Each time a person is subjected to this effect within a 24-hour period, they take a -2 penalty to this check. So if that adversary just repeatedly trying to wear down your ability to resist it, eventually you're just going to succumb to it. Um, if the adversary is successful, it reduces the victim's actions by 1. So it effectively sort of stun locks them, reduces their actions by 1 per success for rounds equal to adversary's resolve. So depending on how powerful that is. If this reduces the victim's actions to 0, they can be directed by the adversary to use up to 2 actions and use of the victim's own test pools. So they can now force your buddy to shoot, a teammate. Multiple successful uses against the same victim resets the length of time, and it does not stack. So I realize we're been at this for quite some time. Other things include increased size. This makes them go up and down. Increased size. You gain the killer instinct, which means it'll increase their uh, ferocity, and they gain the hardy positive impact, which then gives them more stamina. But they also gain clumsy, negative impact twice, which means their agility is going to go down, even if they would normally not be able to. Silent Hunter is another good example. Adversary with this ability can hide themselves much better than otherwise should be able to. It blends in with its surroundings and gains a +5 to its stealth. That's pretty big if they want to get in do some preparations before some enhanced come into the room. Um, think Predator, where they've got that sort of you can only see like an outline as they deflect light around them. Telepathic communication, pretty self-explanatory, where they can link with another creature or they can force contact. Um, but if the person doesn't want it, it could cause potential damage. This can also be taken to improvement. Deceitful strikes, where with this one, if they attack from stealth, which is a really good one with Silent Hunter, they may instead use their agility if it is greater, and if it's a melee attack, they add their ferocity to damage as normal. So they get to do more damage if they can pull this off, but it has to be done from stealth. Regenerative healing, just like other systems, the enemy is going to be much harder to take down because at the beginning of their turn, they're going to heal a certain amount of damage dependent on how many times the adversary has this particular positive impact. The rest of these, like Necrotic Touch, does an additional damage. Corrosive Spit is a ranged attack, doing an acid damage. toxic aura, which is similar to other auras. Now, mind you, again, they can only have one aura active at a time. So, if say they have two aura um, uh, positive impacts, they have to choose which one they're going to use. And other things like this, like the venom injector, is related to the bestial weaponry, and it causes a very specific type of damage or has specific effects, which are very similar to the conditions that we have, where the more that they are exposed to it, the worse it gets. And then again, can be improved. Visual refraction is very similar again to Predator, doing something where they gain a bonus to stealth. Barely able to see, and to see through something like that would require a heightened sense of some sort, or some other magical ability to get around it. Lightning reflexes would improve their evasiveness skill by +2, which is again is something that you have to. Now you could just give them the skill, and they'll be fine with that. Or you could spend an impact tag and improve their agility, which is going to improve their evasiveness. Or you could give them this one, which won't do any of the other cool stuff, but very much focuses on evasiveness. Again, that's down to picking and choosing what you want them to be good at. Sensory hypnotics is very similar in that it can um, daze players, and then something along the lines of strong build. This gives the adversary a positive impact um, to treat its stamina as 2 higher for determining health. Now, that does not inherently increase its stamina, but you're treating it as 2 for the purposes of determining health. It may also hold a single passenger of standard size, so another person, or 2 of smaller size, 3 of compact, or any number of poxy. So basically, this is like a war horse where it can hold them onto somebody else. It's more hardy, but in terms of other factors like its resistance to poison or anything else that requires a standard, its stamina is not affected by it. Now we're on to negative impacts, and I'm not going to go through all these as much as the positive impacts because it's much the same way. Weak limbed, it takes a -1 to ferocity. You do that, now it's not going to be quite as ferocious, but you're going to be able to throw an extra positive impact in there because they have this negative. All of these, the weak limbed, clumsy, enfeebled, are basically the opposite to the other boosts, except that they have the hindrance tag. Again, it can only have these, each one a maximum of one per echelon. Sunlight sensitivity is one that we mentioned for that light, uh, for that living shadow sort of things. They would gain this diminutive size, making it a little bit smaller. Um, Fearful makes it easier to be scared. So you're going to, if it has that and a player identifies that it might be a fearful uh, adversary, you might be able to force it to run away. Um, these are all pretty similar. And we will make this, we have previously made this particular document available for people to go through and read and provide feedback, and we'll do so again now that it has been updated somewhat. And as you can see, another standout one would be an unwilling minion, which is they would gain this if they spend an action to make a resolve plus knowledge theology check versus the adversary's resolve plus empathy. If the adversary fails, it takes damage equal to the attacker's resolve. If the attacker has the talk them down merit, um, and that is something reserved for our other things. Those are kind of like feats in other systems. Instead, may make one action against the adversary. So this is the it's unwilling uh, control an adversary or something else has unwilling control over it. by having this, it can try to fight that control. Now, onto some of our example adversaries. We have an Alp, who we've deemed as a curse, and it is small. And as an example, it's just an alpha echelon, rank 2, or difficulty 2, and its origin is German. Onto its so as an alpha, it's times 1. Remember, so everything starts at 2, has 2 stamina and 2 wounds. So it's got the dead, and then it's got the 1, and it has the stealth and evasiveness skills, and it has the silent hunter and bestial weaponry bite, and the um, heightened senses impact tags. Why does it have 3 positive impacts? Because it has a negative impact. So it starts with 2, and then it gains a third one because of that negative impact. And then we have the description of a small creature of German folklore similar to a vampire or incubus. It feeds on unsuspecting people as they sleep and is often thought to be the name of an elf. Other names include a Trud, Mar, Mart, Mar, Scrat, Walrider, commonly associated with sleep paralysis, not overly dangerous to those that are already wary, but in large groups can be deadly. Absolutely. If, say, you're fighting 5 or 6 of these, eventually, because players only have a certain amount of evasions per turn, you can be overwhelmed by even weak enemies if there's enough of them. So this is a really weak enemy. Would say it's attacking with that bite of ferocity 2, and it has silent hunter. It's going to get a bonus when it uses. It doesn't have the. Um, it doesn't have the skill for unarmed. Yep, as a good example, goblins will never be an auto win because if there's enough of them, it's gonna be a problem. It's very difficult to have an auto win aside from now because it has such low health, 2 stamina and 2 wounds. It shouldn't be a problem to take out fairly easily, depending on your ferocity, your equipment, things like that. Onto an Aswang, a Viscera Sucker, um, and this is substantially more difficult. It is the humanoid and bestial types. Uh, it is a standard human-sized. As an echelon beta, its traits will be times 1.5. So it starts out with a 4, and you can see that some of these are already altered, and we'll get around to that with an abyssal shroud. So it starts with jaws, and then it has draining jaws based off of that. So it's going to do some real. It's your basic vampire in that one. So it has, because it's difficulty 4, it has 1, 2, 3, 4, and because it has abyssal shroud negative impact, it has a 5th positive impact. But because it has difficulty 4, its stamina is 6, so it has stamina, and then it has 3 wounds. Because it has dead, it has alpha, and then it has a third one. An Aswang is an umbrella term for a various shapeshifting evil creature in Filipino folklore, such as vampires, ghouls, witches, viscera suckers, and transforming human beast hybrids. Discovery and experimentation with such creatures has led to the formation and discovery of amalgamations, a great assortment of variations. Potentially, this may lead to drastic differences in types of Aswangs. With some common features, it is best to keep on defensive until the exact variety is pinned down during confrontation. So what this means is these are known specifically to have a lot of variety to them. So have fun switching things out, make it more skilled, take out that the draining jaws, maybe give it flyer positive impact. Have fun with it. Onto a Bogart. Now, this is a good example of a curse, this manifestation of ill will, and this thing is tiny. We're talking like cat size. It's a little imp. As a difficulty 3 and an alpha is relatively not to be thought as all that difficult. As you can see, some nice variation in the attributes, but again, its health is not great based off of its stamina. Because of an alpha, it's only got 2 wounds. So it's going to be gain that penalties really quick. And its positive impacts of technology possession. So it might try to take over that gun, that um, phone of yours. It can do illusions. So it's got one, two, three. And then because it has um, one, two, three, six, and it has weak limbed and enfeebled. May have given this one a little bit too much. Always malevolent, and this shapeshifting creature often will play nasty tricks and shapeshift to whatever it perceives to be one of the worst fears of its victims. Often, it will use its illusions to test its prospective victims from stealth in order to assert what it fears, then appears as that creature. So that's the illusions and shapeshifting. Um, Now, onto the haunted doll. In classic, we've all seen these sorts of things in, like, Chucky is a good example, or what's that one? There was a movie. It's not Doll Master, Puppet Master, where it had a bunch of little dolls running around and they would kill people. That sort of thing. We've all seen that. Or Annabelle, good example. So as a difficulty 1, but as a Charlie, it could be extremely dangerous. So it starts out with a difficulty 1 times 2. So it's got a sort of a medium amount of attributes, but because of its echelon, it can probably stick around a little bit longer. Now it's only got 1 skill based off of its difficulty, and it's got a positive impact for greater destiny. That means it will probably be able to pick some really cool destiny abilities, and vary it up. Remnants of a past life still lingering on well past its years. Potentially, this item belonged to another or was in some way important to someone. There are cases in which such an item, regardless of how beneficent the original owner was, has become corrupted and malevolent. It strives to cause chaos, pain, and even harm to those it can get near. We have included a positive potential change where you can create a swarm of these adversaries. Should not increase the echelon, but treat the swarm as a single creature, instead changing the difficulty as needed, or multiple swarms. That means like a whole group of these things might be coming after players, and it will change those the difficulties. It will change, requirement of area effects, that sort of thing, or instead increase the size. This would change it up, increase it by 1. First use of size up positive impact does not count against this particular adversary's positive impacts. So we've given some options for you to use with this particular one. Now, I apologize if I mispronounce this one. Obaifu, which is a Ashanti lore, um, which is, I apologize. I still lift this as undead. It should be lingering, but that would be, it is lingering as our version of undead. Echelon beta, difficulty 3. So times 1.5. There's no variation in the attributes on this one because its skills are occult, dodge, and brawl. or it would be knowledge occult. Um, and it would have the three, one, two, three, but it also has a couple of additional negative impacts. So this one is a nice variation on what it can do, but its attributes are pretty much base of what its mix of difficulty and echelon make it. Onto Shadow People. This is the one I mentioned earlier of a lingering, a curse, and a curse, and has the um, manifested weaponry. So these are the Shadow People, has been in Legends for years, a lot of pop culture. They've been seen all over the world in various regions. They are just everywhere. So that's going to end up being like a modern culture sort of reference. So as a beta and a difficulty 2, so it's 1.5 rounded up. So its base attributes and its stealth and evasiveness make it very good at hiding and very good at dodging. And it has the living shadow. It is permanently tied to that, and it is draining. But it also has the manifested weaponry because it is single minded. So it is less intelligent. I'll have to adjust that. So it should be less intelligent, but it has the extra one. It is a remnant of ill will manifested it as an animated shadow. And we have an example of a manifested weapon. And we will narrow this down, but this is the sort of templated that will be, and of like a very specific manifested weapon, which you'll have, the different types of based off of our modular weapon system. On to our last, I believe it is our last one for this preview of a Will o' the Wisp, which is the thoughtful, and Myth, which is, uh, European, uh, British, Celtic, has plenty of lore regarding these as a little creature that can be found in the woods, sometimes leads people astray, that sort of thing. Not particularly difficult, not particularly threatening. As you can see, its attributes are all at base 1. Its stamina is 1, and it has the 2 wounds because it has dead, and then it's an alpha. Now, it only has 1 skill in empathy, so it can sort of get you to do what you want. And it has a bunch of negative impacts because of its particular types. It would gain a bunch based off of those. And it has a couple of negative impacts. Like flyer would be its base one. It wouldn't have grounded. It is basically given that up in order for flyer. So as you can see, there's lots of different examples of what you can do with this particular system. How you would make your base creatures versus what you can switch out here and there. We will do more with this later on and show you lots more as we develop more. Like I said, for the core book, will be about 30 that we're going to present as a examples that you can use, but we will also include the adversary system so that you can still make and play around with the system. That overall bestiary book, and I use the term bestiary because that's basically what it's stylized after. Uh, will have a much more comprehensive listing of these adversaries, but it is not required to have both because the core mechanics of how you use adversaries will be in the core book. And we will include all that sort of stuff in our digital format when we have completed those. So, is there any sort of questions that might be had? We will make this document also available for people to go through again. It will be on our website. We will have links to it in our various media. Um, is there any questions? It doesn't look like it. So guess we will end there. And thank you for joining us. This has been with Mr. Bitey's Games and Hobbies. My name is Jace from Nematon Studios, working together to create this wonderful, fantastic, crazy stuff for you guys, and hope you have enjoyed. Thank you. Have a good one.